What's up, everybody? Welcome to Make Things Tiny. My name is Meg. The tiny house industry is nothing like it was 5, 10, or 15 years ago, so it's no surprise that some of you are wondering if tiny homes are even worth it at all, which is why I created this video today to talk about that. So the question for today is, are tiny homes worth it? And if you've been watching the channel, you might be thinking, why would you ask us this question when you love all things tiny homes and you're trying to be our source for all things tiny? That's a fair question. I just want to make sure that I talk through some of the things I'm noticing in the industry, predictions I have for the future, and then make sure you guys watch to the end so you can get some specific tips on the top 3 things I think you should be thinking about right now if you want to go tiny in the next year or two. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Let's get into it. Let's talk about whether or not tiny homes are worth it. Alright, so first up we're going to talk about what the tiny house industry is as a whole. So the pictures you see are just the houses, right? So you see a cool house on social media, here on YouTube, that's a tiny home. But the industry is much bigger than just the houses on wheels, on foundation, and the ADUs that are popping up in your neighbor's backyard. The industry itself consists of the tiny home builders, people like you who are interested in going tiny, but then there's also a much larger system within the housing industry as a whole that affects tiny houses, affects your prices, affects whether you can put a tiny house in your backyard. So the industry itself is actually affected by the manufactured housing industry, which we're seeing a boom of right now, the RV industry, which I know some of you have mentioned here on the channel in the comments, the larger housing industry, so the real estate market. So right now, houses being at $400,000 in general in the United States is having a big effect on the price of tiny homes. More on that in a future video. The tourism industry affects whether or not people are interested in tiny homes. So those of you who are curious about tiny homes for Airbnbs and short-term rentals, that's actually impacted by the tourism industry and whether or not people want to travel, whether or not tiny homes are even interesting to people. Glamping, if you will. And then there's also the media, so social media, everything you're seeing on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, here on YouTube as well too. And then the larger media like HGTV, in my opinion, has had a huge impact on the tiny house industry as a whole. So you have to look at all of these things together when you're thinking about things such as cost or even the types of tiny homes that you see, like aesthetically, like the design, all of those things. And then the different industries like manufactured housing and RVs and the housing industry, all of those things affect the tiny house industry. Now, I don't know if that was the case when the movement first started, but it's definitely the case right now. So that's kind of the world that you're living in. Which leads me to what I think is going to happen in the future. So right now, new tiny house builders and new communities are popping up every day. You see them here on the channel. I think that that's going to continue to happen. You're going to continue to see more tiny house builders coming into the industry because it is becoming such a popular market and it's expected to continue to grow. Right now, the average tiny house price sits at around $67,000. I think that that's going to go up. So that's my first prediction. The cost is going to continue to go up. I'll delve through this a little more in a future video and just talk about costs with some other people in the industry. But for now, just know that, at least in my opinion, the cost of tiny homes is going to keep going up. The size of tiny homes, I think, will keep going up too. Right now, the average square footage sits at around 225, but from what I've seen, people seem to actually want bigger tiny homes. So that's definitely going to have an impact on the industry, which leads me to my next point. I think park models are actually the future of tiny homes. Now, I know some of you don't like them. I've seen some of the comments, and that's fair. It is a bit of, I guess, distant from what you traditionally think about with tiny homes, which is on wheels, smaller, on a trailer. Park model homes are bigger. You're not going to move them in the same way, but I do think that park model homes are the future, and this is why. First of all, they're closer to manufactured homes, and manufactured housing industry is just skyrocketing right now for a couple of reasons. They're bigger, you can get more for your money. They're also cheaper than a standalone home, and some of the communities are seeing sort of like getting like a refresh, if you will, and it's great for people that are downsizing or retiring too. And I'm seeing more tiny house communities create park model tiny homes or partner with park model tiny home builders or go that route. And it seems like, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Again, I welcome them as always. I appreciate all of you, talking and having great conversations about some of the things I've mentioned in the videos. But Park models seem to be make more sense for people that want to downsize or just want to live in a tiny house community. Like, not everyone's thinking, let me buy a tiny house and drive it around the country or move it. So for a lot of you who are interested in going tiny, it doesn't matter if it's not something you can move as easily. So that's why I think park models are the future of the industry, or at least a large share of the tiny house market will go to park models, in my opinion, or tiny homes on foundations, especially now as ADU laws are getting better across the country, and definitely here on the West Coast. I also think, this is my last prediction, I also think that you'll see more people looking for land in tiny house communities. So not necessarily looking to get land on their own, even though that is an option, but looking for tiny house communities where you can also own the land. So look out for that. So those are my predictions, that park models will be the future of the industry. You're going to see a lot more of those pop up. I don't think tiny houses on wheels are going to be as popular in the next, even 3 to 5 years as they have been. And then you'll see more people looking to buy land, but within a tiny house community. Why am I telling you this? Which leads me to sort of the last part of this video. First and foremost, I just want you to be informed. So I've taken the time to do a lot of research in this industry, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to interact with a lot of different people, builders, people that have gone tiny, people that have left tiny, and I just want to make sure you all have as much information as possible as you continue to make these decisions. The other reason is because I think there's some things that you can be doing right now if you're curious about going tiny in the next 1 to 2 years that will help you. The first thing I want to say is that you need to work backwards from the land. So before you think about the size of the tiny home you want, how pretty you want it to look, all the features you want in there, you need to think about where you're going to put it. So are you going to put it in someone's backyard? Because that's going to change things. Are you going to buy your own land and put it there? You need to be thinking about that. Not every place that you live will allow you to buy land and just toss a tiny house on it. So you have to think about the laws in your area. Do you want to live in a tiny house community? So those are the first thing is to work backwards from the land. And then the second thing is, I know a lot of you have talked about cost, and that goes against my prediction that the cost is going to continue to go up. And we know now you're looking at least, like 70K range is the average. So I would say to really consider whether or not you would be interested in or have the capacity to buy a shell from a builder and then just take the time over the next 1 to 2 years before you can live in it and just build it out yourself. Get some how-to books, maybe buy some friends a couple of pizzas so that you can all come together and help build your home. I think the DIY approach might be the most cost-effective for those of you who are looking to go tiny that are, frustrated by the rising costs. And I think the other thing is, if you do want a builder, to really think about, spend the time to do the research to figure out which builder makes the most sense for you. I know I drive that home a lot, but I think it's going to be important now more than it ever has been, because there are so many new companies popping up all the time, and I don't want any of you to make a decision that you're not going to be happy with, 5 or 10 years down the line. So just make sure you take the time to ask a lot of questions, and make sure you focus on whether or not that builder can customize things for you or not. And make sure you really do meet them and ask the questions. Don't just go off the pictures that you see. The pictures are great, and the pictures are always going to be there, but it really does matter who builds your home. So take the time to get to know them. Go through all the videos I have here and reach out to any of the people that have made sense to you. And if you watch all of these and you're not feeling it, reach out and I can help you out, in terms of narrowing things down too. That's the main thing is the industry is definitely changing, but it's not random. There are so many different industries that are kind of making it seem like there's more pressure in terms of this industry, but it's just because there's so much going on with the larger housing industry that's creating a lot of different issues within this industry itself. But it's not going anywhere. The prices are going to keep going up. Park models, I think, are here to stay for sure. And you have the opportunity to go tiny and not break the budget, but you do have to really plan things out over the next year or two, because the prices are going to change even more. I think $200,000 tiny houses are going to be the norm. So, or at least 150. Definitely, we're seeing a lot more than six figures. So, yeah, so I'm kind of trying to say get ready for it, I guess, if you will. Reach out, ask questions, and if you're interested in learning more about just other people taking the time to do the DIY approach, you can check out some of the videos I have here. I feel like I'm always like recommending people check out the video that Tiffany did, but I think Tiffany's a really good example of what can happen if you really plan things out in terms of buying the land and then building it yourself. Even if it takes you, 2 or 3 years, it's definitely worth it. So are tiny homes worth it? I would say yes, but I think you need to really think through why you want one. Do you really want to downsize? Do you want it to be a short-term rental? Like, do you really want to live in it is, I think, the main question. Because I think it's one thing to want to buy one as a short-term rental and put it on a piece of land you have somewhere, or buy a cheap piece of land and toss it there and rent it out, than it is to live in one. And that's going to change everything. Your budget, your timeline, honestly, even who would build it. Maybe one builder is better for a short-term rental, less customization, more in line with what most people would want to see, versus someone who can customize it and make it your dream home. So yeah, I will always say that they're worth it. I just think that with everything that's happening in the industry, you really need to think through why you want one. So yeah, that's kind of the main thing, but I want to know what you guys think. I appreciate you guys talking in the comments, asking questions, being skeptical, being frustrated. So yeah, what do you think? Are tiny homes worth it? I'll leave you all with that one. And don't forget to think tiny. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.